Thank you very much. Hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you and to share my thoughts on a subject that you're all very aware of, test cases. But first, let me tell you a few things about myself. I am Maja. I am a software tester at Infinum, where I started working a year and a half ago, and I'm working from Infinum's office in Zagreb. Okay, so I'm ready to start with my presentation. This is going to be the content. At the beginning, I'm going to say something about the dynamics between speed and quality in nowadays market. Then I'm going to move on to test cases and put them into the context of Agile methodology. After that, I'm going to question the dominance of test cases with reference to the article, "Test cases are not testing." And in the end, I'm going to try to give you some conclusion. And after that, I'd like to hear some of your experiences and answer your questions if you'll have any. So, speed versus quality. Why even put them in the opposition? So, as a QA practitioners, we of course know that quality is paramount. But when we look at the nowadays market and society, we can say that the most, at least for me, the most observable characteristic that I can see is speed and accelerance, everything accelerating at a very fast pace. You see, we have like this trend in fast industries like fast food, fast fashion, and maybe we are even moving towards fast education. The content that we are receiving has also become very fast, and everything is kind of bite-sized. So here you have a project management triangle that has triple constraints. We have scope, time, and cost, and they all need to be balanced in order to maintain quality. If on nowadays market society or something, we are maximizing one of those constraints, like let's say we are maximizing speed, we definitely need to compromise the others. So when we look back at those fast industries that I mentioned, what do you think what is compromised? It seems that the quality is being compromised. So what does this mean actually for us? Is this something that we need to expect in a society that is always moving forward? If we're always going to speed up, is quality going to suffer because of that? Well, luckily no, because consumers are more demanding than ever, and they will not satisfy for they will not satisfy in order to receive something in a fast manner, but with low quality. So modern consumers, their characteristics are low tolerance for errors, and as I say, they will not wait for items they want. Organizations needed to find a way to answer those demands of modern consumers, and the way they approached it is agile transformation. So how do you maintain relevance in a market? You need to be very adaptive. You need to be agile. So agile transformation, one of its greatest benefits is improved product quality. That basically means that when the company is agile, when the company is adaptive, it is giving high value and it is giving it faster. These are some of the agile core values: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This basically means that communication between members of a team is more important than the tools that they use. Working software over comprehensive documentation, it means that it is more important to actually give a software to consumers, and then you can improve it over the time, rather than wait for a documentation to be completely over. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. It means that at the very early phase of developing a product, you are actually having a dialogue with your consumers and approving a product when you receive a feedback. And the last one, responding to change over following a plan, of course, in order to stay relevant in nowadays market. Okay, so test cases is something that manual testers especially do every day. How do they actually fit into this agile methodology? Okay, so we know how the test cases look. This is one example of test cases. Test cases are a set of instructions on how to determine whether a functionality behaves as expected. There are some rules that should be followed when writing test cases. They should be independent of each other. One step should be atomic. There should not be any further sub-steps. Tests should only have one path. Every step should have expected result. They should be simple and easy to understand. Simple and easy to understand for who? When you look at this, it looks like it's, like a robot could actually understand it. It's not, a human that does not necessarily need that specific explanations when they're exploring the app. So, test cases are in fact detailed, they are procedural, they are documented, and they restrict thinking. So they're completely opposite of what Agile core values, what Agile completely stands for. So how come they are still being so much used in our everyday life? What I have seen, or what I have mostly seen when I was doing my research online is the sentence that they are a backbone of software quality. Okay, but how can something that restricts thinking be the backbone of a quality? Aren't we, as testers, as someone who is creative, who finds a way how to explore the app, isn't that actually the whole value of testing as a performance, of testing being done? Well, I find answers in the article Test Cases Are Not Testing, where they are giving actually a criticism of this dominance of test cases, and the article challenges the importance of test cases. Okay, in that article, there is a mention of test case culture and the factory schools. What does that mean? Test case culture is a culture that is obsessed with test cases, where test cases are equated to testing, where writing test cases becomes skill, and a tester is merely someone who is doing a mechanical and clerical work of actually performing test cases. Test cases become a commodity, which means that the more you have them, the better the testing is done. And they're calling it also the factory school because it somehow reminds of a factory, because when you work in a factory, there is only one path that you can follow that needs to be defined and followed. And we have, for that reason, we have these cartoonishly simplistic test cases like the one that I've shown you. And what is happening? When you're writing that sort of test cases, testers easily become fungible. They are expendable. They are not so important. Well, the important is the process, the test itself. And they are challenging this idea because that's not what testing should be. Just writing test cases should not be equated to testing, because then anyone could do, really anyone could do that, and we can just leave everything to automation. But we cannot do that. We as humans really do give some extra value to what we are doing. So if testing is not writing test cases, what is it? It's a performance. It means it depends on the credibility of the performer. Testing means exploring the relationship between the product and the values about them, seeing if there is any other way that that product could provide a solution for consumers. And testing is making social judgment. This is very important because it's giving that human touch to the whole process of testing. Because when we are not rigidly following rules, we are actually being creative and thinking of all the ways that our customers could approach the app or whatever software we are testing, and we can think of ways how to even make it more easier, make it more approachable for everyone. Very interestingly, I was also looking a bit more into more scientific research, and actually none of the research ever suggested that scripted testing was producing better results than exploratory testing. So if I even found that in some cases, exploratory testing could result in finding more bugs than scripted tested, but the difference was not that significant, but I found it somewhere. So the next question is, if test cases do not mean that the quality will be improved, what are they actually used for? The thing is, testing is very hard to... Hi, here you go. Hi. Testing is very hard to show, but counting test cases is not that hard. So it kind of seems that test cases have now become the metric of our job, which should not be their point. It's not important of how many test cases you write, it's important how well do you do your job. And since it's not very easy to measure how well do you do your job, but it's easy to count how many test cases you have done, maybe that could be the reason why we are insisting on writing so many test cases. And that's not a good reason. Does that mean that we should completely give up on test cases? Of course, no, but I'll go to that a bit later. So from this previous research, these are basically the results that I found, that exploratory testing is equally effective in detecting defects as the traditional testing. That both scripted testing and exploratory testing provide strengths and weaknesses, and the best way to perform testing is to do both, because they complement each other in their weaknesses and strengths. So exploratory testing has less of a structure and specified process, which is better for agile methodology, while scripted testing has standardized documentation. In exploratory testing, tester has more personal freedom, and in scripted, there is no deviation from scripts. Exploratory requires in-depth domain knowledge, while in scripted testing, testers can overcome the lack of knowledge during this test design phase. Exploratory testing mirrors user experience, while scripted focuses on limited areas constrained by the script. In exploratory testing, you can find defects faster, especially UI bugs, and in scripted, fewer bugs are found. But exploratory testing has no clear and measurable test coverage, while scripted testing provides it. So what would be the best way? What I have found, what actually fits me most, is that this context-driven testing that promotes a humanist performance-oriented vision of testing. And it basically says that any practice has its value depending on the context. So they're not against any practice, they're just against methodological chauvinism. They're against the fact that sometimes you need to, sometimes you are required to do that many test cases and do this many things, and you are totally disregarding the possibilities that your testers could have. So what should we do? We should strive to go toward a performance culture. We should try to look at testing as a concept in a different way. It's as an activity performed by skilled people. When the recruitment is being done, we should hire testers who demonstrate curiosity, who enjoy learning about technology, and who are not afraid of confusion, of complexity, of exploring. we should have different people working on projects, diversity among testers, talents, temperaments. That way we can maximize performance in test teams. When it comes to documentation, we don't need to completely disregard test cases, but maybe we should more focus on taking notes, writing down ideas, and of course, if someone is new to the team, they need to write test cases, but we don't need to necessarily follow these rigid rules because they're really a constraint to the quality of the testing as a performance in the end. So this is basically my conclusion. I'd like to hear something more about your experiences. How do you do your things at your companies? And of course, answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Maja. Any questions, comments? Okay, two. Who is going to go first?
Okay, I can start.
Did
Did you do any actual real-life tests to compare these two approaches to the topic, like yourselves, or do you know about any? Because the references that you listed were maybe a little bit older references. I'm not sure if that plays a role, but I would think it does. Because I agree with you on some points, but not on all of them, because I do think automation testing is extremely important, especially on bigger cases, and if there is a bigger change, let's say somewhere in the back end, you're probably not going to be testing everything by hand, right? But I do agree that both approaches together bring better results than just strictly going in one direction. But yeah, did you maybe do you have experience with, let's say, testing the same thing with different approaches?
Yes, but I think I made a mistake at the beginning. So because I didn't clarify what this is actually, what my critique was actually about. I don't think that we shouldn't use automated tests, not at all. I just think that while manual testers are writing test cases, they should not automate themselves in a way that their tests are so like they are writing them for fools and not for actual skilled testers who are going to use the software. We should definitely automate something that's never been the question. So maybe I should have told that in the beginning. I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree with you that I, as a manual tester who am writing test cases, have really felt as if when I need to go through so many steps and I just need to because it's required, I don't have time to, take a step back, relax, and try to think of some other ways where I could find bugs or some other ways to use the app. You wanted to ask me something?
Thank you for this presentation. It was really nice.
Thank you.
And I actually agree with all of the top main points. And I read this article too. And also I read another article where they stated that they wanted to teach some students to some basics of quality assurance. And what they found out is that if they were given the task to test something like in exploratory way, they really thrive in that, they really enjoyed it. And then when they give them the scripted tests or test cases, they were all like, no, I don't want to do that. So I think this is another research, but it was more of a blog, so that points out that test cases should not always be there for every single feature.
Yeah, I agree. They should not be mandatory. They have their place in the Iranian industry, of course. Something should be written in that specific way. But I somehow feel that it has become mandatory just because you want to present to management or someone else how much of the work you have done. And that should not be the case.
Yeah, and I actually after reading this article, I asked my coworkers, if they are doing test cases, and we don't do them in our company. Nobody said it.
But you're taking notes, I guess. Yeah, of course.
We had a discussion later, and they said that, okay, test cases are good for documentation and for onboarding other new people, but yeah, otherwise they're dull.
Yeah, what do you do during regression testing? Relying on the notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when it comes to regression testing, that's where automation is extremely useful. Extremely.
But what if some people go from the company and a new one comes and you have just personal notes and this knowledge is then lost?
Oh no, those are shared notes. I don't mean when I say note taking, let's say I'm going to be like upload the photo. Doesn't have it can be one sentence. It doesn't have to have steps. Log in, do this, step that. When I say note taking, it's more like that. We don't have to follow so rigid rules and waste so much time on that because it's kind of sometimes counterproductive.
I would add that this depends also on the context, as you said. I mean, if the project is so big that it needs documentation that's very exhaustive, then yeah, we should take it in a way that's not too complex, as Maja said. But if the project is very small or personal notes would be sufficient, then yeah, it doesn't make sense to write comprehensive documentation. But yeah, it's a context of an agency where we have huge projects and small projects, so it could differ from company to company.
Yeah, but I even think that on bigger projects, you don't need to always rely on those specific step-to-step writing test cases, because sometimes you can think of a scenario that you can write down in a sentence, and when you have a novice on a project, they'll need to go to certain beginning test cases in order to understand the app, and after that they will probably not need that many steps to follow. So that's my kind of point of view, what I think would be the best thing to do, even on big projects. Anyone else?
What would you say about the argument that could be made that writing detailed test steps actually helps in automating those test cases later on? For instance, we can have a project that's a startup, or not a startup, but a new product that is reaching its MVP phase, and the client is not willing or doesn't have the budget or the time to actually invest in automating from the beginning. So it relies only on somewhat of a manual testing, but at some point that project is it's no longer an MVP or a startup. It's starting to grow bigger and bigger, and you want to bring in test automation engineers to do exactly as you said, to help you reduce the time needed for regression testing and the stress needed for regression testing. I think that we can all assume that if you're working for 2 or 3 weeks on 300, 400 test cases, you just want to kill yourself.
Yeah.
That's it. So what would you say to an argument that having detailed test cases could help onboard and automate those test cases as soon as possible, because then the test automation engineer doesn't actually need to know details about the project itself, about the core of the project. He just needs to follow the steps and translate them into a code which is going to run on a CI environment.
Well, this is also very, as I said, context dependent. So how many hours will you spend and how many test cases you want to automate? Is it worth that you are doing the detailed 300 test cases if only 5 of them are going to be automated? So, of course, I don't know the answer to that. I kind of think that maybe the basic things that are repetitive, maybe those things could be written in a more detailed way, but let's say some of the more end-to-end sort of approach doesn't necessarily, because it will likely not be automated, if you understand what I want to say. or if I have answered your question.
I don't think there is quite an answer to this
Yeah,
question,
there
to
isn't.
be honest, but one of the maybe approaches could be to think of in advance, as you said, which cases could be automated in near or far future, and then focus on having those test cases detailed as much as possible, while having others as simple as possible. Exactly as you said, to give, even though you have a test case, to give the freedom to the person who is going to run that test case to maybe not click exclusively on the top left corner, maybe just hit those, what were 3 pixels or something like that
Yeah.
to the right or something like that. Thanks.
Thank you for asking. Yeah?
So I'm wondering about what you mean by giving you more freedom. Is that more freedom to break things, or is that more freedom to think about user experience and maybe give feedback on that?
I should always have. Sorry. I should always have freedom to break things. That's my job. I think more freedom in a way that. So when you always need to write these cases and maintain them, and then there is regression, and then you have this very often released, like at least once a month or even more than once a month, I kind of feel like I'm bound to go through all the test cases that I've already been through and just don't have, not necessarily freedom, but time to be free to think of some other ways. And of course, in the end, if someone asks me what were you doing that day, thinking of ways how to, I don't know. It's weird. I'm kind of used to. I'm also kind of used to thinking that test cases, if I've done a lot of them, if I've passed a lot of them, I've done a lot of job. But I don't think that's a good way of thinking. And the research actually says it's not the best way of thinking. So that's a shift that I would like to do with my presentation, even to myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maja, what do you think about taking notes while working on a complex project like a space shuttle or something like that?
I would like to work at a space shuttle, and I will write any test cases, whatever they want. It wouldn't be a problem. And but I think that at some point, yeah, they also should write notes, but notes that are understandable for everyone. Like I don't know. I don't have an example from a space shuttle, unfortunately.
About like extensive documentation or detailed one or the one we talked. I mean, does this theory apply to any complex project?
Potentially, because if we are coming as testers to a project that we. I mean, we're testers. We're not professionals in every domain that we are actually testing. So let's say, for example, I'm going actually to a project with rockets and everything. I need to. Sorry.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Someone needs to teach me something. So they probably have some onboarding document. And I think that could be enough for a novice tester to understand what everything is going about, what everything's happening. And then from that point, I can start imagining what my testing could look like. And not necessarily writing tests for everything that I've already understand that a software or rocket or whatever should do.
You cannot just need unexpected behavior or some function.
Sorry. What,
you need to have at least some documentation. But,
yeah, of course. I don't think that we should be completely without documentation. But maybe with less documentation.
And I completely agree with your colleague. It's not really black and white, right? You do need some test cases. You do need this structure, right? And you do need, this whole point of these writing test cases is eventually to automate them, right? Because those test cases are basically your regression checks. And eventually once those are, automated, you actually have a lot of freedom. Those cases get covered, and you do have this time. You don't have to recheck over and over, right? But you do need them, because you do need to know, if you're just gonna go straight in and go like, oh, I'm just gonna do this exploratory testing, you're gonna miss important parts that, otherwise you would have this check that you need to check somewhere. But totally without it, you're kind of like, going in blind.
Yeah, of course, I completely agree with that. The only thing that I want to say is I haven't experienced that much that so many tests are actually being automated during regression testing. That's the problem. If that would be like a normal thing that every tester should expect, then of course you can write it. It's not a problem, because one day it will be automated and you don't have to do regression like practically never. You just need to test new functionalities. But I haven't experienced that actually. So yeah, I agree. Some documentation is...
That's a different problem than actually, not wanting to have them at all.
Maybe, but it's a real one that's happening right now, and yeah, maybe this could also make another presentation about the importance of automation as well. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make, right? The value of writing test cases, right? In comparison to exploratory testing is, okay, it gives you the structure when you decide, to ensure that you cover different areas of the product that you're testing, right? And at the same time, it should be a base for regression testing later on, right? And the value of these cases is kind of increased based on two things, right? The first one is how long you need to maintain the product, right? And check those regressions time after time, right? And the other is, whether or not those tests actually end up in some automated suites.
Yeah.
If those two things are both checked, then the value of doing those test cases is really high, right? If not, if you have smaller projects and shorter maintenance times and so on, and less automation, then this value decreases, and it's mostly, as you said, administration.
Yeah.
I have maybe an observation, not so much as a question. We ran into your problem with I'm glad I have a name for this, like Test Case Factory, and we kind of dealt with it in a hybrid way. So I'll probably talk about it later on. The other thing is that, for instance, game development is like an area where structured testing has no place, basically. Because while people are testing the games, they're being changed, and once the game is out there, there's really no need to automate anything. It's being published and it's done. So there, the exploratory testing is like of really high value.
Yeah, not only that, really big games like Rockstar level, big games, like how much time would you need to invest to automate every possible scenario? 3 new iterations would come out already and crash or sold out. So yeah, that's actually a good point for the gaming industry. Okay, I think we're a bit tight on time.
Yeah, and thank you for that. It's a good intro for your presentation, I guess.
Okay, I would like us to give one last round of applause.
Thank you.